Alrighty, guys, here we are with point number 3 of our 10 common weight loss mistakes. This one is about relying too much on the scales, and you might have heard me talking about this a little bit in the past. They seem to have really become the gold standard for the measure of success when we're making lifestyle changes and trying to improve our health, which, there's a lot of reasons for that, I suppose, but I've seen a lot of people over the years, especially who do weight training and stuff like that, and resistance training in general. I've seen a lot of them change really dramatically in their shape and feel sensational compared to how they felt, say, 6 months ago. But they've been really pretty upset by the number they're seeing on the scales. And I used to be a bit like this too. I used to have a bit of a thing about the scales where I'd get on there every single day, and I got really quite obsessed. It was helpful, I guess, in that it taught me a fair bit about the things that can affect the scales, which I think is really important to have knowledge about, because at any given time of day, it can read something quite different. I mean, you might try to get on the scale, say, 5 times over the course of a day, and just take note, I guess, just for education's sake, just take note of what it's saying at all those different times of the day. It can depend on so many things. I think I've got it here on the next slide. It can depend on the time of the day, how long since you last ate or drank, how long since you last went to the toilet, how hydrated you are, hormones, especially for women, that can really dictate how bloated we become and stuff like that. Sodium's another big one. I say to people a lot, don't have soup the day before weigh-in because it's often quite salty and you can become quite bloated, and it will register on the scales as fluid. It's not actually fat. A lot of people panic thinking that they've gained 2 kilos when it's actually more about being a bit bloated and retaining fluid, which is what can happen if you have a lot of sodium. So it's really not the most reliable measure out there, and people have really become very reliant on them as the sole measure of whether their exercise and changes to their diet are having an effect as far as their weight goes. And I guess that is what weight is. But who really sees the number on the scales except you and maybe your trainer or something like that? Nobody else sees it. People are looking at your shape and stuff. Not that any of it really matters at the end of the day, but they're not looking at the number of the scale. So it really shouldn't be the be all and end all. There's a lot of other measures we need to look at that are more interesting, I think, for your health. Blood pressure and stuff like that, at the end of the day, are going to be more important than what the number on the scale says. And as we've seen, that can change over a matter of hours. So it's not the most reliable measure, but for some reason we all feel as though that is the way to tell whether we've improved or not. How do we avoid doing this? A lot of my clients don't actually weigh in because that's not the determining factor for them. But if you do decide that you'd like to do weigh-ins, and a lot of people do like to have a bit of a vague idea and to be able to say at the end of the day, well, I might have lost 30 kilos. They want to know where they started from, and that's fine. But if you do decide that you're going to do it, decide how often you're going to do it. So it might be fortnightly, it might be monthly, it might be every couple of months, it might be quarterly. It depends what will work for you. Decide on what other ways you might be successful that are meaningful for you. And it might be about centimetres, it might be about blood pressure, it might be about your fitness, how breathless you get when you walk around the park or something like that, chasing after kids, all that sort of stuff. So there are a lot of different measures that are not at all related to the number on the scales that you could be using. So you need to sort of take note of them. I would put the scales away, out of sight, and just get them out when you're going to do that weigh-in, and then straight back in the cupboard or wherever you decide to keep them. I've got some people who have to have their partners hide them from them initially because they've been so fixated on that number initially that they can't stop. So, and if you see them there, you might go, oh, I'll just quickly jump on and see what it says today. Try and avoid doing that. Try and put them away so you're not tempted to do it in between. And yeah, just really be aware of the different factors that can have an impact on what the scales say at any given point in time. So I've got clients who weigh in at 7 o'clock at night, and for most people, 7 o'clock at night is, they might have had dinner, they might not have, they've had a busy day and they might not have had as much to drink. All these sort of factors can have a role in what it says at any given point in time. So if you're going to do it, I would also recommend doing it first thing in the morning after you've gone to the toilet, either with no clothes on or the same clothes each time, if you're going to do it. So that way it's fairly consistent. It's going to have the least number of variables, but some of those variables are still going to exist. So it's never going to be the most reliable measure out there. So don't fixate too much on that. Focus on some of the other more meaningful measures of success. All right, so I'll be back again in a minute with point number 4. See you soon.